I always know that worship is going to be lit, as the young people say, when Jael sings. So I just love how you usher in the presence in this space. Thank you, Mike Coffey. Good morning. I am Kirstie Engel. I'm the spiritual leader of this community. First of all, I want to say I'm energized in this space right now. You know, as school has opened back up again, we have Nebraska Wesleyan students in the house, and we just want to show you some love and let you know that, yes, let's show them some love. Let you know that this time of our 8:30 service, we've made a lot of changes as far as worship is designed and so forth, but we were praying and thinking about, in particular, you all. We wanted to make sure that there was also a space where you can come as you are, where you can just be intentional about learning how to navigate adulting, because I know it's real out there, amen, somebody. And so I just want you to know that we are here for you, and we hope that if you enjoyed this worship celebration and experience, all of you, but especially our students, share the word and let them know they can come on over. We are in the middle of pandemic, unfortunately, but we still are navigating ways to be able to be in community together. So we give you thanks. I also want to take the opportunity to acknowledge our flower ministry, which is a ministry and a preach word all in itself. We are grateful for the arrangements that are in this space, still signaling that we are in summer, but I'm thinking fall is approaching sometime soon. So we're thankful for that evidence. So now I'd like to center our time with a reading that was provided from the Flower Ministry. I always love when they're able to give me nice things to say to center our time. So this is Praying by Mary Oliver. It doesn't have to be the blue iris. It could be weeds in a vacant lot or a few small stones. Just pay attention. Then patch a few words together and don't try to make them elaborate. This isn't a contest, but the doorway into thanks in a silence in which another voice may speak. Wow, that's deep. Let the church say amen. I also want to acknowledge our online worshiping body. We are so grateful that we are able to speak to you and worship with you and preach and teach while you are watching at home. And so we want to acknowledge your vital presence as well. We can't do any of this without you. So with that said, let's enter into the word. We are still in a new sermon series entitled Holy Momentum. Just a reminder, the idea behind this sermon series is that now that we have spent a considerable amount of time talking about holy movement, i.e. I'm talking about moving out of our comfort zones or moving out of our boxes or bubbles, whatever picture fits your story, into a place of intentional reconciling work. Now we are going to spend some time on naming what this work looks like in detail. So my preaching hope and goal is to begin laying down a foundation for how you and I might begin the process of building momentum, keeping our momentum, and sustaining our momentum for the work that lies ahead. And so just to reiterate from last week to ensure that we're all on the same page as far as what I mean by holy momentum, momentum defined is a product of the mass of a particle and its velocity. Momentum, as I stated last week, is a vector quantity, meaning it has both magnitude and direction. Isaac Newton's second law of motion states that the time rate of change of momentum is equal to the force acting on the particle. I'm inviting us to be symbolically those particles of movement. So when I am using the term holy momentum, what I'm essentially trying to plant within all of us is a mustard seed of increasing forward motion. Last week, we spent some time in talking about how to build momentum. That was week 1, and we were using the story of Solomon, who is now taking the reins of his father David's leadership with the task of leading Israel. I named from Solomon's story that how you and I begin to build momentum is that it starts essentially with our mindset. For when you and I step out of our boxes, bubbles, or comfort zones, whether you're a freshman starting out at NWU or whether you're interested in participating in the life of the church, I stopped by to say this is a very scary thing to do. I'm not trying to undermine the importance of how significant that first step is. Furthermore, what typically determines our next steps and how firm they are when our feet actually begins to hit the ground is what is going on in our mind. For typically, if you walk with me, if we're fearful of what lies ahead, our steps may be a little tentative. If we feel unclear about what lies ahead, our steps may be a little shaky. Looking at Solomon, he had a lot of aspirations to be successful in his leadership. He was also determined, if you get with me in this story, to do just as good of a job, if not better, than his dad. As a side note to the parents and parent figures and to the students starting in your freshman year, this is not a bad thing. As a mom, I can tell you for our children to want to strive to do better in my eyes. For a part of parenting is to teach our children to want better, to strive to do better, and not make the same mistakes that we might have done. Hence the older days, do as I say, not as I do. Hello, somebody. So this is what I'm seeing going on with this takeover with Solomon, this son, who was a skillful and ambitious leader who recognized, this is an important fact, that humility would serve him greater than being arrogant or prideful in his leadership. And so how Solomon began to build his momentum started with his mindset. And through Solomon's actions, he teaches us that if you and I wish to get our head in the game the right way, if you and I wish to have a firm and clear direction on how to move forward, then it starts with opening up a conversation with the great Almighty who will show us how to navigate in the work that lies ahead. And so that is what Solomon does. In my biblical imagination, now we're in the text today, Solomon goes into his prayer closet and he opens up a conversation with God, essentially, where he could have asked God for anything in the world, fame, success, political power, and more. But what Solomon asked for instead was for a spirit of discernment. Solomon asked for wisdom. A prayer request that moved the Holy One so much so that God said, not only will I grant you that, we learned from last week, but I will also grant you the desires of your heart, strong leadership, political favor, and more. God is just that good. Which then allows Solomon to begin to move out of his comfort zone with a sense of purpose and direction, and dare I even say, confidence. Fast forwarding more to our scriptural lesson this week, if you have followed the sermon series that I've been led to preach earlier, many should take note that now the priests are carrying the Ark of God again, proving that Solomon is already leading a little bit more wiser than his daddy, who thought it would be best to put the Ark of God on a new cart, which would be unstable, and then in a shelter that God never asked David to build. For we also learn as we journeyed with David weeks ago in his conversation with God by way of the prophet Nathan, that God preferred to be in the moving tabernacle so that the Ark of God could always be with the people. So the first celebration of Solomon that I'm giving him a metaphorical high five on is that his discernment process led him to make sure that the Ark of God was with him and carried by the people again. Which helps me then to move into my second goal that I'm already ready to dive into, and that is what it looks like, church, after we build the momentum. Our main focus will be on keeping the momentum in our work. After we build the momentum, meaning taking that first step out, now what we're looking at is how do we keep that momentum? So part of how you and I begin to keep the momentum is by staying connected with God in prayer, hence what we're witnessing unfold in our passage of scripture right now. The work that lied ahead for Solomon was to establish a temple for the people to be able to pray, worship, and seek forgiveness from God for their sins. So Solomon's, if you can just get with me in this story, dedicatory prayer, which many scholars have agreed was prepared beforehand because it was that good. With careful thought, he begins with thanksgiving to God for God's faithfulness towards his dad, David. Next, the emphasis falls upon the faithful obedience of Israel, which obedience is a tricky word right now. Then follows supplication for the temple that it might fulfill the purpose for which it was built, namely, that here people may pray and God may forgive. So the other part then of how I see keeping the momentum begins to unfold, that I believe is uncanny for us in the future of the church. It resides in an acknowledgement that Solomon makes towards the end of our lesson today. That's where I'm getting my preaching energy. Solomon in verse 41, as he is wrapping up this prayer, says something pretty profound that I believe will inform the future of our church and many other churches if we're wise to pay attention to this. Solomon says, verse 41, likewise, when a foreigner who is not of your people Israel comes from a distant land because of your name, for they shall hear of your great name, your mighty hand, and your outstretched arm. When a foreigner comes, he says, and prays towards this house, then hear in heaven your dwelling place, and do according to all that the foreigner calls to you, so that all the peoples of the earth may know your name and fear you, as do your people Israel, and so that they may know that your name has been invoked on this house that I have built. So we're going to spend some time unpacking that, all of that. And so how I would like to unpack these verses that I'm getting some preaching energy is I would like to begin with an ode adage that my husband always says to me, and it might explain or alter a little bit more as I transition this story to our story. I'm talking about a collective story where First United Methodist Church of Lincoln, Nebraska strives to be a community-centered, focused, and driven community seeking to share God's affirming love to everyone. We say that we are a reconciling congregation whose story reflects a statement of diversity and love for all, and to be inclusive to all persons regardless of education, ability, economic status, gender, race, ethnic group, age, or sexual orientation. That's who we are here. So the saying that my husband will always tell me as it pertains to the leadership that I'm striving to plant a mustard seed of reconciling love and faith in is this: build it and they will come. Ooh, child, build it and they will come. I'm getting chills already. A little fun fact before I get right in about this phrase that you may be interested in hearing is that the phrase build it and they will come, according to Wikipedia, says it's a misquote from the 1989 movie Field of Dreams. Anyone seen that? Oh yeah, y'all, some of y'all too young to be raising your hand. Okay. It says the actual words are from a voice in the head of hero Ray Kinsella, a novelist and short story writer who wrote Shoeless Joe, which was adapted into the movie Field of Dreams. And in his experience, he said that this phrase would pop up in his head a lot. If you build it, they will come. So what is going on in Solomon's leadership that I think really informs us of the future of our church, especially this reconciling community where here we are, this is what we're saying, is this acknowledgement that once this temple is built in all of its glory, others will come. And guess what? They will not all be Israelites. The text calls the others foreigners. Help me, Lord. Which sadly in our world today has become a political, emotional trigger for a lot of us, that word. Especially with the very disheartening pictures of the people in Afghanistan climbing onto the plane as our American troops and any other groups that had any affiliation with the U.S. mission in Afghanistan are attempting to make their way home. I'm just praying for that whole situation. A situation in a history that I need to let you know that is so complex that I'm still trying to make heads or tail of it all. For this would require years of Middle Eastern studies that I am not super well versed in. So hear me clearly. This is not me creating blame or political division. However, what I can name is the grief and the terror that is gripping my heart at the thought of the oppression that the women and the children and the people in particular are enduring and will have to continue to endure. Church, my heart is disturbed at how many lives will sadly be at risk and tragically killed for the freedom that many of us here in the U.S. get to have. Is that all right if I just name that heaviness in my soul? So this world event is just one reminder of a very unfortunate situation where an answer, at least in my eyes, is not easily detectable. It's been 20 years. Nor fault can I confidently name, and I don't think that's my position to do so. But what I can do is make a connection to this text today. Solomon expresses an awareness that foreigners will most likely come into this temple. Foreigners, if we can perhaps get our mind into a space to hear this word in a different way, in the biblical sense, refers to anybody who was from another ethnic group but had chosen to live with the Jews in Israel. No matter what category they might represent in today's terms, that's what the Bible is talking about here. And so at this level of awareness then, if I can make a connection, Solomon then, this is why I'm drawn to him, not only prays for the foreigners, but he even in his prayer welcomes them to dwell in the temple with them. All because Solomon's leadership in my eyes is embodying the same concept that my husband always tells me as a point of motivation when I'm feeling down and out. Build it and they will come. Now, church, if you're still with me and I haven't lost you, it's time to keep connecting more dots here. When the First United Methodist Church of Lincoln, Nebraska worked especially hard in becoming this reconciling community that I fleshed out in the 80s, under my leadership, we invested in our sign on our lawn that you see on the screens that says, "All are welcome here," with a rainbow flower. Even prior to this move, I've studied the church, all of our peacemaking workshops and small groups and our social justice emphasis with Reverend Ebb and Dr. Black and many other strong pastors before me. The appointment of an African-American male clergy years ago, and now you have this youngish African-American female woman with a loud booming voice and a wardrobe to match. Partner with a young associate pastor with tattoos and enough energy that makes me tired even thinking about her right now. She's doing work off-site, but we love you, Pastor Katie. I can safely name and claim that, like Solomon, we have built a sanctuary. We've built a temple that extends itself out to our northeast neighborhood of Lincoln, Nebraska. A blue collar, because I researched this too, lower income neighborhood, rich with diversity and more. We have built an online presence with inclusive messages week to week. We have built a worship space that says all are welcome through our worship, in our small groups, in our staffing, and more. As a result, we are now beginning to experience the fruits of all of our labor that started 30 years ago or more, and look at us now. If we are not becoming the epitome of the adage, build it and they will come, I don't know what could be a better example of this statement coming to life right before our very eyes. For we, church, I guess what I'm naming, are beginning to look like the neighborhood that surrounds us. We are literally becoming that rainbow out on our lawn. A rainbow that symbolizes LGBTQ pride and safety. A rainbow that symbolizes racial harmony. A rainbow that symbolizes different hues and backgrounds and belief systems. Yes, we have atheists, we have agnostics, we have people that are high church, we have people that have low Christology. We have all of that. We have all of this culminating, every socioeconomic status and more. We are a rainbow where I'm beginning to experience this. Sometimes the colors may begin to start fading into one another. A rainbow where sometimes it may feel as if the colors may even be competing with one another at times. A rainbow that can mean many different things to many different people. A rainbow that I stopped by to say we are all in. A rainbow that still, even with that reality, may be a place that all of us are not quite sure how to take in all of this brilliance and magnificence. That's how I choose to look at it. We're just not there yet, some of us, and that's okay, but it is beautiful. So Solomon's prayer teaches us, in my opinion then, how you and I really begin to keep the momentum in this work of reconciliation. Not only do we do this by praying for the foreigners that will come, we must create a space where, as we continue building this temple together, we let all who come know that they are welcome to dwell in this space. Build it, and they will come. Thank you for that constant encouragement, babe. Thanks be to God.